I never imagined that request for space would change everything. At that moment, I thought it was just a phase, a small separation needed for things between me and my husband to go back to normal. But the truth is, when he said he needed space, something inside me broke. I knew it wouldn't be simple, but I never imagined what would come next. I found myself lost, navigating through a feeling of emptiness, not knowing exactly what to do. The house that once felt like a home now seemed like a strange place, with his absence echoing in every corner. I tried to fill the time, work, go out with friends, but nothing could fill the hole he left behind. I began to question myself. Does he really love me? Am I enough? I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to know what was going through his mind. Until one day, out of the blue, the truth appeared before me. He wasn't alone. While I was trying to deal with his absence, he was involved with other women. The shock was devastating. I spent days trying to understand, trying to justify the unjustifiable. But the more I thought, the more the pain grew. He betrayed me, and everything I believed about our relationship started to crumble. And then he came back. He confessed everything. His words were full of sincerity, but the weight of it all crushed me. He thought I wouldn't accept him anymore, that what he did was something irreparable. In that moment, I found myself lost between the love I still felt for him and the anger of everything he put me through. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to make a decision, and that decision would change my life forever. Now, as I tell this story, I can only think about how things changed. And what comes next, you'll understand what happened afterward. Don't miss it. I never imagined something like this would happen to me. He came home every day as if nothing had changed, but the truth was everything was different. Not just between us, but inside me. When he told me about the other women, I was swept away by a whirlwind of emotions, and with every word he said, a piece of me was falling apart. He apologized, tried to convince me that it meant nothing, that it had all been a mistake, but I couldn't believe his words. How could I? How could I trust someone who looked me in the eyes and lied to me so easily? He didn't seem to understand the magnitude of what he had done. For him, it was probably a momentary lapse, something he could move past with time, but for me, that moment became a daily nightmare. He looked at me with that regretful gaze, waiting for a sign from me that everything would be okay, that I would forgive him, and we'd go back to what we were. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should forgive him, if I should leave behind everything we had built together. The pain I felt was so deep it seemed to drain all my energy. I didn't know who I was anymore or what I wanted. Sometimes I felt so weak, as if I didn't have the strength to move forward, but other times, a fire within me told me I deserved more, that I shouldn't settle for less. I was torn, lost, and every day I sank deeper into this sea of uncertainty. He, in turn, tried to convince me that he cared, that he was sorry, that he loved me, but the words didn't seem to have weight. I couldn't trust him anymore. How could I look at him and believe he wouldn't take advantage of my vulnerability to hurt me again? I don't know how many nights I spent in silence, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what to do. There were no answers, only pain. The pain of knowing that he was there, beside me, yet still so distant. The pain of realizing that the marriage I thought was solid was cracking, and I didn't know if I could glue the pieces back together. I know many of you have probably gone through something like this, or maybe you can imagine what it would be like to live through something like this. And I really want to know, truly, what would you do if you were in my place? Could you forgive, move on? Or would you feel there's no going back after such a deep betrayal? Leave your thoughts in the comments, share with me. I'd really like to hear what you think, what you do, because the pain I'm feeling is so hard to express. It feels like words are never enough to describe the emptiness left after being betrayed like this. But going back to what happened, the following weeks were a mix of tension and failed attempts at reconciliation. I tried to act normal, as if everything was fine, but every smile I gave was forced. Every gesture of affection was a reflection of what I thought I should do, not what I truly felt. He constantly reached out to me, asking if I was okay, if I had forgiven him, and if there was anything he could do to show that he was sorry. But how could I forgive him? How could I trust someone who made me feel like I wasn't enough? With time, I started to pull away more. I distanced myself from him, not out of malice, but as a form of self-protection. The fear of being hurt again began to dominate my thoughts. I asked myself if this distancing was just a temporary defense, a reaction to the pain he caused me, or if, in fact, he was pushing me away forever. I wanted so much to find a way to fix things, to heal the wounds he caused, but something inside me told me it wouldn't be that simple. He might have had other intentions, but mine were confused, torn by pain and doubt. And in the middle of all this turmoil, I began to realize something I didn't want to admit. Maybe I couldn't see him the same way anymore. Maybe I had lost him forever, not because I rejected him, but because the scars of betrayal were too deep to ignore. The worst part is that the more I tried to forgive him, the more I lost myself in the process. The love I still felt for him seemed farther away, as if I were trying to reach a version of him that no longer existed. He had become someone I didn't recognize, and maybe that transformation was irreversible. I knew I had to make a decision, but indecision was consuming me. I didn't want to be weak. I didn't want to seem like I was giving in to the pain, but I also didn't want to seem like I was giving up everything we had built. The fear of making the wrong choice paralyzed me, and every day that passed, I felt more distant from who I truly was. A part of me still loved him, but another part of me knew I couldn't continue like this. I was in an emotional maze, and I didn't know which path to take. Now, more than ever, I understood how complex and fragile relationships are. Betrayal isn't just about an act of infidelity. It's about the breaking of a trust that takes years to build. And the worst part is that when that trust is destroyed, it's impossible to know if it can ever be restored. But at the same time, I asked myself, maybe I could still forgive, rebuild, but what did I really want for myself? What would be healthiest for my soul? I don't know if I'll find an easy answer, but I know that, from this moment on, everything would change. My path was before me, and more than ever, I needed to find my own peace. When he finally came back to me, I thought for a brief second that maybe things could somehow return to the way they once were. But the moment he opened his mouth and confessed everything, I felt as though the floor disappeared beneath my feet. His words were sharp, each one cutting deeper than the last. He told me plainly that during the time we were apart, he had been with other women, not just one, but several. He said it in such a straightforward way, almost as if honesty would soften the pain, as if admitting it openly would somehow lessen the weight of betrayal. But for me, it didn't. It only made it heavier. I stared at him, searching for a trace of the man I had once trusted with my entire heart, but all I could see was someone I no longer recognized. My chest tightened, and I couldn't even find the words to respond. He seemed almost convinced that after telling me the truth, I would push him away for good. He said he thought I would never want him again, that I wouldn't be able to accept the kind of man he had become. A part of me wanted to scream, to shout that he was right, that I could never look at him the same way again. Yet another part of me, quieter but still present, kept asking, if he was being honest now, was that not worth something? My heart was at war with itself. I was torn between the remnants of the love I still carried and the bitterness of the wounds he had inflicted. It was strange because while he spoke, I could see that he expected punishment, rejection, the final breaking of our bond. But what he didn't expect was my silence, my inability to decide in that moment. I didn't throw him out, but I didn't forgive him either. I just stayed frozen, my mind spiraling into questions I couldn't answer. Was his honesty now a sign that he truly regretted it? Or was it only because he thought the truth would set him free from guilt? Could love survive so many fractures? Or was I just afraid of being alone, clinging to the shadow of what we once had? Those questions haunted me. That night, as he slept beside me, I lay awake, feeling both suffocated and empty. His presence no longer comforted me. It only reminded me of the nights he had chosen someone else instead of me. The man I had once trusted with my soul had become the very person who shattered it. And yet, despite the devastation, I couldn't stop wondering if there was still something left to hold on to. The irony of it all is that he thought the truth would push me away forever, but in reality, it trapped me in a deeper confusion. Because when someone you love wounds you so profoundly, the hardest part isn't deciding whether to stay or go. It's realizing that either choice will break you in different ways. The next few days felt like a blur, as if I were trapped in some kind of emotional fog that I couldn't escape from. He would come to me, sitting beside me, looking at me with those sad eyes, trying to convey all the regret he was feeling, but I couldn't make sense of anything he was saying. He wanted to make up for everything, to show me that he still loved me, but the words he spoke were empty to me now. They felt like echoes of a person I once knew, but who no longer existed in the same way. I found myself wondering if he even truly understood the damage he had caused, or if he was just trying to salvage what was left of his own guilt. It was hard to look at him without feeling an overwhelming sense of betrayal. It wasn't just the physical infidelity, the women he had been with while I was waiting for him. It was the emotional betrayal that cut deeper. I had trusted him with my heart, and he had thrown it away like it was nothing. In those moments, I kept asking myself, how could I go back to him after everything? How could I pretend that I hadn't seen the man I loved disappear right before my eyes? How could I look at him without thinking about the other women, the lies, the broken promises? It was suffocating, and I didn't know how to escape. I wanted to scream at him, to demand answers, to tell him that it was over, that I couldn't forgive him. But then there was this strange, almost desperate part of me that still wanted him to fight for me. I wanted him to prove that he was worth the second chance. I wanted to feel like I mattered enough for him to change, for him to truly show that he was committed to rebuilding what we had broken. But every time he tried, it felt like I was just going through the motions of forgiveness because that was what I thought I should do. I didn't know what I was doing anymore. I didn't know if I was holding on because I truly believed in the possibility of healing, or if I was just afraid of being alone. Every moment I spent with him was a reminder of the man he had been and the man he had become, and I couldn't reconcile those two versions of him. Every time he touched me, every time he looked at me, I felt like I was suffocating. His touch, once a comfort, now felt foreign, like a stranger's hands on my skin. It made me question everything. Could I really let go of what we had? Could I truly let him go and live without him? Or was I just so deeply afraid of losing the person I had invested so much of myself in? I began to realize that I had no idea who I was without him. Our lives had been so intertwined that, even though I knew deep down that I deserved more, I didn't know what my life would look like without him in it. I found myself in a constant state of inner conflict, constantly battling between the love I still felt for him and the resentment that was growing inside of me. I couldn't continue to live like this, caught between the past and the present, between the woman I used to be and the woman I was becoming. I needed to find a way out, but I didn't know how. My heart was torn in so many directions. I tried to focus on the practical things, work, household tasks, day-to-day life, but everything felt like a blur. It was like I was living in two different realities. On one hand, I was trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy, pretending like everything was fine, but on the other hand, I felt like I was being slowly suffocated by the weight of everything that had happened. I realized I was living in fear of the unknown, afraid of making the wrong decision, afraid of what would happen if I chose to let him go, or if I chose to stay and continue trying to fix something that felt beyond repair. The fear of change was overwhelming, and every time I thought about the future, I found myself paralyzed with indecision. I began to question everything about myself. Was I strong enough to walk away? Was I strong enough to face the life that was waiting for me outside of this marriage? I wasn't sure. I didn't know if I could be. What if I failed? What if I regretted leaving him and then couldn't find my way back? The doubts kept swirling around my mind, making everything feel even more impossible. There were moments when I thought I had made up my mind, when I felt like I was ready to walk away, but then he would say something, do something, that made me question everything again. I couldn't escape the pull of his presence, the weight of his apology, the sadness in his eyes when he told me how much he loved me and how sorry he was for everything. It felt like I was drowning in it, and I didn't know how to swim to safety. But somewhere deep inside of me, I knew that I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, lost in a sea of indecision and pain. I needed to find a way to either heal or move on. I couldn't keep waiting for him to fix everything. I needed to fix myself first. And that meant facing the hardest truth of all. No one else could heal me except for me. No matter how much he wanted to make things right, no matter how many apologies he offered, I had to be the one to decide if I was willing to give him another chance or if I was ready to let go of everything we once had. It was the hardest decision I would ever make, and I knew it would change the course of my life forever. But I didn't know if I had the strength to make it just yet. I wanted to believe that love could conquer all, but I also knew that sometimes love wasn't enough. Not when it had been betrayed so deeply. The decision weighed heavily on me, and every time I thought I might be ready to let go, something would pull me back in. It wasn't even about him anymore, it was about me. It was about finding a way to hold on to myself, to protect what little remained of my sense of identity. For so long, I had defined myself by this marriage, by the love I gave, by the person I thought I was when we were together. Now, I felt as though that person had disappeared. I didn't know who I was without him, without us. I kept going over everything, every moment of joy, every moment of pain, and wondered if it was all worth it. I knew there were memories that still brought a smile to my face, but there were others that tore at my heart. The love I had felt for him now felt like a distant echo, fading with each passing day. It wasn't just his betrayal that hurt, it was the fact that he had taken something from me that I could never get back, my trust. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight, and I realized that it wasn't something I could give him again, not after everything. I thought that maybe with time, I could forget the way I had felt when he had betrayed me. But I had been fooling myself. The hurt wasn't something that could simply be erased by time or his apologies. It lingered, silently but powerfully, in everything we did. I couldn't look at him the same way. I couldn't touch him the same way. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke to me, all of it now seemed like a reminder of what he had done. It was as though the love we shared had been tainted, poisoned by his actions. I didn't want to feel this way. I didn't want to feel bitter or broken. But I also didn't want to continue living a lie, pretending that things could ever go back to the way they were. The hardest part of all of this was realizing that I had been living in a fantasy. I had thought that love would conquer everything, that it would be enough to fix the damage, to overcome the pain. But the truth was, love was only part of the equation. Without trust, without respect, love is just a word, empty, meaningless. And now I was left with a choice. I could keep trying to convince myself that it was all worth saving, that maybe he could change, that maybe we could rebuild what had been lost. Or I could face the painful reality that we were no longer the people we once were. We had been broken, and maybe, just maybe, some things can't be fixed. I started to question whether I was holding on to him because I was afraid of being alone, or because I truly believed in the possibility of a better future together. I wasn't sure. All I knew was that I couldn't keep living in the shadow of my past mistakes, in the shadow of my doubts. I needed to decide if I could truly forgive him, if I could truly forgive myself for allowing myself to stay, or if I was only afraid of the unknown. The pain of betrayal is a slow burn. It doesn't go away quickly, and it doesn't fade with apologies. It lingers, gnawing at your confidence, at your self-worth. And the worst part is, when you've been hurt so deeply, you start to question everything about yourself. Did I do something wrong? Did I miss the signs? Could I have prevented this from happening? The questions ran through my mind constantly, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow to blame. But in the silence of my own thoughts, I started to realize that I wasn't responsible for his actions. He was. He made those choices. He betrayed me, and I had to accept that it wasn't my fault. But even knowing that didn't make the decision any easier. Could I leave him, knowing that I would have to face the rest of my life without him? Could I walk away from someone I had loved for so long, someone who still meant so much to me, even after everything? These questions tormented me, and the longer I stayed with him, the more I felt like I was losing myself. I wasn't the woman I used to be, and I didn't know if I could ever be her again. But I knew one thing. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay when it wasn't. I had to make a decision, not just for him, but for me. I had to find a way to heal, to move forward, to reclaim my own life. The hardest part wasn't letting him go. It was letting go of the version of myself that I had become in the process. The version that had sacrificed too much, given too much, and lost too much. I had to let go of the idea that our past could be salvaged, that I could somehow erase the hurt and rebuild the trust. I had to let go of the hope that he could ever be the person I needed him to be. And that, in itself, was the most painful thing of all. But it was also the most liberating. I realized that in order to heal, I needed to stop looking back and start looking forward. I couldn't continue to live in the past. It was time for me to let go and face the future, no matter how uncertain it seemed. Because in the end, I couldn't wait for him to fix me. I had to fix myself. The days that followed were filled with silence, the kind of silence that was thick with unspoken words and unresolved feelings. It wasn't that we were avoiding each other. It was more like we were two strangers occupying the same space, both desperately trying to figure out what had gone wrong and how to fix it. But I knew deep down that nothing could fix what had been broken. We were no longer the people we once were, and trying to pretend otherwise felt like a betrayal to myself. I couldn't keep living in this emotional limbo, torn between the love I still had for him and the deep-rooted pain he had caused me. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to the idea of us, to the version of our relationship that existed before everything fell apart. But the more I tried to grasp it, the more it slipped through my fingers, like sand that refused to stay in my palm. I had given him so many chances already, chances to be honest, chances to prove his commitment, chances to make things right. But every time, I found myself disappointed. Every time I was left holding the pieces of a broken promise. And now, as I looked at him, I realized that no amount of apologies or promises could ever take away the hurt. The damage had been done. His betrayal wasn't just about him being with other women. It was about the way he had shattered everything we had built. The trust, the love, the connection. Everything had been stripped away, and all that was left was a hollow shell of what once was. I had spent so much time wondering if I could forgive him, if I could look past the mistakes he had made and start over. But with each passing day, I knew more and more that forgiveness wasn't enough. It wasn't just about forgiving him for what he had done. It was about forgiving myself for allowing myself to stay, for allowing myself to be treated like I didn't matter. I had to accept that I deserved more than this. I deserved more than broken promises and false hope. I deserved more than a love that had been tainted by lies. And it wasn't easy to accept that. It wasn't easy to admit that the person I thought I would grow old with might not be the person I was meant to spend the rest of my life with. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to let go of someone you still love. Letting go didn't mean I had stopped loving him. It meant that I had stopped holding on to a version of him that no longer existed. It meant that I had started to love myself enough to walk away, to choose myself over the pain, over the uncertainty, over the fear of being alone. And that, more than anything, was the turning point. It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. I had spent so much of my life living for him, living for our relationship, living for the idea of us. But now, I had to live for myself. I had to figure out who I was without him, without the weight of our past weighing me down. It wasn't going to be easy. There would be moments of doubt, moments when I questioned if I had made the right choice. But deep down, I knew it was the only choice I could make. The hardest part wasn't walking away from him. It was walking away from the life I had imagined for us, from the future I had once thought we would share. But I had to let go of that dream because holding on to it was only keeping me in the past, only keeping me tied to something that was never going to be the same again. It wasn't just about him being unfaithful. It was about the way his actions had forced me to confront parts of myself I had been avoiding. It was about the realization that I had been sacrificing too much of myself for someone who wasn't willing to do the same for me. And as much as I hated to admit it, I had to face the truth. I couldn't keep waiting for him to change. I had to change. I had to find a way to heal, to move forward, to reclaim my own life. And that meant letting go, even though it felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. There were moments when I felt the weight of his absence, when I missed the comfort of his presence, when I longed for the life we once had. But each time those feelings crept in, I reminded myself that I was doing this for me. I was doing this because I deserved to be whole again, because I deserved to live a life free of the constant fear of being hurt again. It was time to stop living in the shadow of what we had lost. It was time to start living in the light of what I could still create for myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. And as I made the decision to let go, I began to feel a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in so long. The weight of the past started to lift, and for the first time in a long time, I could breathe again. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that I was ready to face it, on my own terms, with my own strength. Because in the end, the only person who could truly save me was me. The moment I made the decision to move forward, I knew that it was only the beginning of a long and difficult journey. It wasn't going to be a clean break, not by any means. The emotional scars would stay with me for a long time, reminding me of everything I had lost, everything I had endured. But I also knew that I had to do this for myself. I had to heal, I had to reclaim my life, and I had to find peace, peace that had been absent for far too long. There were still moments when I would lie awake at night, replaying the past in my mind, wondering if I had made the right choice. I would think of the good times we had shared, the dreams we once talked about, and the love that had once felt so real. But the pain of betrayal would always push those thoughts away. It was a constant reminder that the past was gone, and I couldn't keep living in it. As time passed, I began to rebuild. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to rediscover who I was. I reconnected with old friends, took time for myself, and did things I had put off for years. I was learning to live again, without the weight of his mistakes hanging over me. And with every day that passed, I felt stronger, more capable of facing the world on my own. It wasn't perfect, and there were days when the loneliness felt overwhelming. There were times when I missed the companionship, the comfort of knowing that someone was there for me. But as I embraced my independence, I also realized that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I had always been whole. I just had to remember that. I didn't need his approval or his love to define my worth. I had my own voice now, and I was ready to use it. And so, with that strength, I began to speak out. I began to share my story, not just for myself, but for others who had been through the same thing. I realized that I wasn't alone, that there were others who had suffered the same heartbreak, the same betrayal. And by telling my story, I could help others heal too. It's not easy to open up about these painful experiences, but I know now that it's necessary. We all have a voice, and we deserve to be heard. So, if you're someone who has suffered in silence, I want you to know that your story matters. Don't let the pain define you. Speak out, share your experience, and let others know that they're not alone. If you've been through something similar, I encourage you to leave a comment below. Let's support one another, because healing begins with connection. And if you want to hear more stories like mine, stories of heartbreak, resilience, and growth, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. By subscribing, you're helping to keep these important conversations alive. You're giving a voice to those who have suffered and allowing others to find strength in their shared experiences. Also, don't forget to check out the other stories on our channel, especially those in the playlist. These stories are a reminder that we're all in this together and that even through our darkest moments, we can find a way to heal. The link to the playlist is in the description or in the pinned comment. I hope you'll join us on this journey, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts, your stories, and your voices. Together, we can continue to heal, grow, and move forward.